On this episode of Vital Signals, we're breaking down the barriers between medical data and better patient outcomes. Our guest is Kevin, CEO of KAID Health, a company using AI and natural language processing to unlock the hidden value in unstructured patient records.
Hey Kevin, thank you for joining today. I'm really looking forward to talk about KAID Health and really dive into some interesting topics today. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Shane. Really a pleasure to meet you, and always a pleasure to meet a fellow New Yorker. So,
Yep.
kindred spirit here, and which also means that we could talk perhaps faster, in a faster cadence than usual, and hopefully the rest of the country can keep up with us.
And nice to understand each other perfectly. So Kevin, could you share a little bit, just as an opener, as your personal story, what really led you to starting the business now?
Sure. And this is the current company that I'm in, KAID Health. It's really, for me, there's lots of terms, a passion project. It is a labor of love, but like any other entrepreneurial venture, it's a labor, no doubt about it. But for me, my journey to KAID, just to take a step back, really started about 25 years ago. We've just met, but I suspect this story predates you.
Oh yeah.
My hairline relative to yours certainly says that I've been doing this a little longer than you have. About 25 years ago, I was doing some management consulting for healthcare providers around the U.S. and then in overseas, including Bermuda and then Asia. And a lot of the work that I was doing back then was taking some form of paper records. I remember one example, anesthesia logs. So, the records of when surgery started and stops, and literally typing it into Excel so we can do some analytics on it. And now this was, 1999, and the internet bubble was in full bloom. And I'm sitting here and I'm actually just digitizing some basic data, operating data on operating rooms to make a pun, just so we can shed some light on how this stuff is working. And it really dawned on me that, if I really want to continue to work in healthcare, that we're going to need this isn't scalable, right? It's too big an industry to rely on every now and then somebody typing some stuff into Excel to do some analytics. So really started that my passion that better data ultimately is one of the ways that we're going to make care better. And, fast forward, I switched gears and went into operating in an entrepreneurial role as I became the head of operations at a company called CareKey. And we were, at the time, this is now fast forward 5 or 6 years later, and we were working with large Blue Cross Blue Shield plans. And this predates the massive proliferation of electronic medical records that really was accelerated by Obama's first term. And it really predated a lot of the movement to value-based care that we see now. So this was old-fashioned. Docs are documenting on paper, and they're still getting paid, do more, make more. But we were trying. Mm-hmm. So we were putting in technology that would help nurses, more efficiently call patients and say, I'm sorry you've been diagnosed with something new. Maybe we can help you through it. And it was an interesting program. The spirit was there. We tried, but it didn't help. Didn't help that much. And the results were very mixed. It didn't help because we didn't really have data. So you have this stranger calling you up and like, I'm sorry, your kids got diagnosed with asthma. And the parent might answer the phone and say, yeah, and they start going into all the stuff that happens, right? I'm a parent. And the poor nurse is like, hold on a second, let me try to write this down, because she had no idea calling. Then she'd call the primary care doc and try to come up with an action plan or whatnot. And realistically, there just wasn't time there was no money to pay for time in the day to do anything differently. So we lacked the data and we lacked the incentives to do the right thing. That was the next epiphany. It's like, began my career, some data is needed. The next step of the journey was, what we really need is actionable patient data, and we need financial incentives to make it worthwhile to do the right thing for the patient. About 10 years ago, I started working with a lot of primary care providers around the U.S. that were taking on this challenge of getting paid for value and trying to get paid to manage a population and get paid to prevent for disease prevention. And they had already spent money, some taxpayer money, some of their own, on electronic medical record systems. And they're like, we're done, right? We solved the problem. We got the electronic medical records. We got some incentives in place. And I was so excited. The problem solved. We're ready to build healthcare 2.0 in America. Like so much of entrepreneurship, it's one step forward, half step back, one step forward, half step back.
Oh, yeah.
Realistically, the EMRs that we had in place were generating documentation, but they really weren't generating the data that we needed to change that care model. So we had some incentives to do the right thing. We had some EMRs that digitized some of the data, but it just wasn't there. And then the last part, I'm sorry, belaboring this journey, but it's intimately important to me. It's my life.
Yeah.
2019, 2020 rolls around and things get bad, right? I mean, we took a broken system, and there's a great book by Dr. David Nash, how COVID crashed the system. And it's a great title because it was very apropos. It was a system that was teetering, and then COVID came along. So providers were losing money hand over fist. They're trying to reinvent their care model in the wake of the pandemic. Everyone's burnt out. Epic and Cerner and ECW and Athena and all these EMRs proliferated. We as a system country put them in place, and they were just cranking out more and more paper, but they weren't generating more and more insights. And I'm married to a physician and living on the front lines of this stuff. The running joke that I tell everyone is, I really just wanted my wife to come to bed.
Yeah.
She was the tip of the spear, right? And she and her doctor and nurse colleagues were all the failures that we as a society had with healthcare delivery and healthcare IT ultimately fell on people like her shoulders. She still had to provide the care. Her nurses still needed to provide the care. There's broken systems, broken incentives, broken data sets. And I'm like, well, let's try to fix this. I said early on, if we had the right data and we had the right incentives, we could do better. We hadn't by then. And then along comes, I'm a technologist by training, and you could take the boy out of MIT, but not MIT out of the boy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this new thing called artificial intelligence is next generation is really gaining popularity. And I say, let's point this tool AI. Well, it's all its limitations and biases, and it's not a panacea, but it is a very powerful weapon in understanding data. Let's point this at this problem of giving providers better insights, better data on their patients, and give it a shot. So that's in 2020, partnered up with an old friend of mine, Peter Zaleski, and we really start off with that mission to organize the data for healthcare providers. And then over time, matured into, which hopefully we'll get into, the revenue cycle space, which was one of the things to help docs make sure that they can pay it so they have money to do the right thing. But as you can tell, it's not like all of a sudden I woke up one day and read an article and been like, well, this is something I need to do.
Yeah.
This need has been building for the better part of 2.5 decades, and one that I will probably spend the rest of my career working on in some form or another.
It's really a fascinating story. So it really started from you 25 years ago, management consultant, and then sort of segued into different elements, but then realizing, okay, better data, and then connecting that to healthcare organizations and really see that importance of actually utilizing their data and how it can, of course, benefit us as the patients.
Yeah. And along that, I do think, and I think some of this comes with, as I mature, this comes along with better data is not for better data's sake. I have no interest in creating cleaner data for providers or even cleaner claims for providers for the sake of that. Ultimately, we really believe that better data leads to better access to better care. Mm-hmm. And the ability to use the ever-growing set of digital data that exists, that surrounds a patient to that end, is really what motivates us. It's so easy to get lost in the day-to-day of data accuracy, sensitivity, specificity of the AI, and all the technical jargon that surrounds us. But at the end of the day, as I mentioned, when we failed as a country, the onus fell on the doctors and the nurses who were trying, ultimately, still had, no matter what, still have to treat the patient.
Yeah.
I used to work for a large dialysis provider, and when we failed as a society to control chronic illness like, for example, diabetes and hypertension, patients, one of the manifestations of that is amputations or dialysis. We really try to keep that in mind, that, better data means better care. It's not an end in itself.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we're on that sort of trajectory for better care in the next few years to come, by the way things are going?
Yeah, I do. I really do. Trying to take the long-term perspective. And look, I can, part of, entrepreneurship is pointing, what's this, McKinney used to say, situation, complication, resolution. Like, what's broken? Why wasn't it fixed? And how my tool is the magic solution to this. So, I don't want to be overly judgmental of the current healthcare system. We are on net. I mean, when I first started, I was literally typing into Excel basic administrative data so that we could do this work. Those days are over. right? The handwriting errors that led to medication errors or wrong site surgeries, we are getting better. And I do believe there's a greater appreciation that, we're not where we need to be. I mean, from a population health perspective or from metrics perspective, I think on the long run, our care is getting better, but we are not getting our return on our investment. We spent, under the first stimulus package, we spent $30 billion conservatively incentivizing electronic medical record adoption. We got the EMRs in place, but our doctors are not that much smarter. They're not satisfied with the tools, and they're not creating that much efficiency. Are we getting better? Sure. Should we have gotten more for our money? Yes. Can AI help us get a lot better, a lot quicker going forward? Absolutely. But, I try to give credit to where it's due, and I think we're making some progress.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'd say in the next, let's say 5 years from now, we'll be having a lot different conversation in terms of what AI has made the impact in healthcare. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens.
Yeah, me too. Yogi Berra is credited with the quote, "It's hard to make predictions, especially about the future." But I think what we're going to see, though, from AI is it's going to Band-Aid over a lot of the system failures that we had. So, a lot of work that we do as a company is understanding the medical record, which includes things like the structured data, like the medications that a patient's on, or the past diagnoses or that they have, or the past procedures that have been done with the stuff that lives in the medical notes. As AI improves, we'll be able to do more automatic error correction, more data homogenization between those disparate data sets. It will, rather than fix the root cause, right, which was documentation and medical record creation is taking too much of provider time, taking them away from their inherent act of being human and healing. We're going to use AI to improve it, so it will get better. But I actually think we can. Again, it's all about comes down to money, right? Can we get better faster? Can we get better cheaper? And more importantly, get these tools to benefit more patients. Yeah, I think we can certainly do better than the trajectory we're on, but I share your optimism.
Yeah. And currently, how do you think, I would say, the future of medical coding, how does that play into the future of AI in healthcare? What sort of element and importance does that fit into the system?
Yeah, it's trust me, this is one that we obviously at my company, KAID Health, when I mentioned, we started off with this journey to understand the medical record, and from that we developed really our first commercial product, which was medical coding for groups that are focused on value-based care. We're seeing, AI having at least several impacts on it. So, just for your listeners who might not be total healthcare geeks like me, medical coding is translating the results of a clinical encounter. You see a doctor, you go to a hospital, it generates a piece of record, and somebody has to turn that narrative into a set of procedure and diagnosis codes to describe what happened so it could be paid for and ultimately analyzed. What we're seeing is, obviously, artificial intelligence is alleviating some of that work. I mean, some of those elements, some types of coding is easier than others. Procedural stuff like radiology or pathology is where the narrative is less complex than, for example, a primary care visit or an oncology visit. AI can just do some of that work. What we're also seeing, though, is because technology, including artificial intelligence, has allowed people to do more is asked of them. And I think that's just inherently human, the health system, and those come about in a couple of different ways. One is the medical coding flow used to be you review the individual encounter, you write, you code up the diagnosis of what was wrong with the patient and what was done. What started getting asked of them is, while you were in the note, while you were doing that, can you start to report some quality metrics? So, for example, we have a code for blood pressure of levels X and Y, or blood sugar of X to Y, or BMI, body mass index from X to Y. So while you're reading the charts, can you translate that clinical data into a code so that we can do some analysis and police it? And also, can you make sure you document a lot of the quality metrics? So make sure you document that you counsel the smoker on the importance of quitting smoking. So that was the first, as tools got better to make coding more efficient, payers were able to ask more of coders. Then comes along value-based care, and it changes the game even more so, because not only are we asking them to track things like quality and disease control, but we're now saying, rather than, patients who are sicker should cost more money. We accept that. So we need to understand how much sicker they are. So can you please not just document everything that's wrong with the diagnosis that we're addressing this patient, but can you then make sure that you understand the complete picture of this patient's health? Now they have to code up not just this encounter, but you have to look back at past medical records because maybe there was a chronic illness that they had last year that needs to be readdressed this year. So now the work just got even bigger, right? So it started with the diagnosis procedures, what happened that day. Now we have quality reporting, we got biometric collections, and we got value-based care. And then other stakeholders start asking questions. Obviously, you want to enroll patients in clinical trials because you get paid for that. It might be good for the patient. Groups that are like my old company that was doing care management want to know things like social determinants of health. So the patient might have noted that he's food insecure or that he has a transportation issue. This is really helpful. This is important stuff. But until somebody puts into the code so it can be analyzed, no one's going to know about it. So I think what we're seeing is there's a phrase that I love called the Red Queen effect, that you have to run faster and faster just to stay in place. As we automate more and more of the routine coding, I don't think the work's going to go away. I think AI and technology is going to mean that more and more is going to be asked of the coding workflow. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. You still have people doing this work, but they're going to be adding more value. For each minute of coder time, they're going to be adding more value to the patient experience and more value to the care process, which I think is, as again, our ultimate mission is better codes, but ultimately better codes for better care. So I think I think AI is not going to just zero out it's not going to be like the telephone operators or what Microsoft Outlook did to secretaries. I think it's going to change the nature of the work more than eliminate it.
So essentially, AI will, of course, increase the workload, but also the value of the care increases as well alongside with that.
Right. Yeah, I would say the AI will allow the AI will decrease the workload, but as such, they'll be able to ask more work to be done, right?
Yeah.
If you have your child mow your lawn and they have an old-fashioned hand lawn mower, you can ask them to do the front yard. You give them an electric lawn mower. It's not like you're going to go let them go play more video games. You're going to say, now you can do both yards and the side yard, right?
And do everything now,
well, you're done, but whether or not you give them back the minutes for leisure, that's to be determined. But just to be clear, my 10-year-old is still not old. He's still not allowed to touch the lawnmower. He's still looking at the guy who takes responsibility. I have dreams of ultimately transitioning that task, but
not yet. In a few years from now.
Maybe. We'll see.
And currently, Kevin, how do you see, let's say, the unstructured data in the current healthcare system now? Why is this such a big problem for the industry?
Yeah, it's a hot mess. And that's not to use an overly technical term here, but hot mess, I think, is a good descriptor. The role of clinical documentation in itself is really interesting, right? I don't want to go into the theory, but it started off as a way to explain clinical decision-making so that for providers themselves and other members of the care team can understand what was happening and can track patient progress over time. It then morphed into more of a compliance area where we need to ultimately to obviously reduce medical liability costs if it's not medical documentation, is how you defend yourself in lawsuits. But even more than that, it really how to defend a claim. Mm-hmm. So if I want to bill for a certain level, I need to make sure I document this number of systems. If I want to, say that this patient has a diagnosis, I need to prove it in several different ways. As such, what happened was they got bigger. You started to write more, but focus less on distilling what's meaningful. I mean, there's a quote misattributed to Mark Twain. I'm sorry, I can have time to write a shorter letter. I mean, I think that's emblematic of medical documentation. I'm sorry I didn't have time to really distill what's most important about this patient into a meaningful section, so I'm going to put it all down there. And then as EMRs got better, Epic has shortcut keys. Now we have voice dictations. The ability to crank out more and more text got better. And now we actually have AI even writing medical text. We're now cranking out more and more text. The notes are now bigger, but the insight, the less density has gone down. And then the third thing that's happened, and we spend a lot of time on this as a company, is so you have this EMR. It's called EMR bloat. So you have patients seeing a lot of doctors. A lot of this stuff is coming in as large text documents are written after each encounter, et cetera, describing the patient. But people are complaining that you're still, despite this big document, I only have a piece of the record. because, they got some care from me. They went across the street and got some care from a specialist there. They got an imaging report, across town. The care is fragmented, so the medical record's fragmented. So what do we do as a society? We spent money on interoperability. So, this is a journey, not a destination. But we have bloated EMR here, A, and bloated EMR B over there. So let's exchange data. So we're pumping now one copy of a bloated EMR from one site to the other.
Mm-hmm.
So we're actually making the problem worse. And this is an example of where AI, I think, will Band-Aid over some of this. Like AI could distill the insights that are EMR A, it can distill the insights in EMR B, and then start to do some homogenization and distillation for the provider, so we can ultimately get down to what really matters is what's wrong with the patient, what do I need to make sure she's getting the right care today, that's safe, it's effective. But there's just the incentives were to write more. And by writing more, there are benefits to that. But, most of costs in healthcare and complexities are driven by chronic illness. These are patients that are seeing lots of different providers over the course of the year. Their medical records become thousands of pages. At some point, having a 2,000-page medical record, I would argue, is the same thing as having nothing. If no one has time to read it before they're treating you, what good is it?
Yeah.
This is where I do think AI is really exciting.
Okay, that's a really good point. And in terms of, I would say, revenue cycle management, how does revenue cycle management fit in KAID's health sort of system and implementation?
Yeah, RCM is a big term encompassing, and I think, my alma mater, McKinsey, I think quantifies it like a $9 billion a year vertical total. And it's everything from making sure that the patient has insurance to the encounter is coded, and then ultimately whoever's responsible to pay it pays it. But within that flow, the hardest part of it is that act of translating what actually happened as part of the care into the medical codes that allows for ultimate payment. That piece is the one that I talked about before, the one that's was already strained with these growing notes, and now the complexities of value-based care and quality reporting. That is just the one we believe is the most ripe for technological disruption. And it really boils down to, it's a big problem. It's an important problem. It drives a lot of either lost revenue or increased operating expense, and it's solvable. And that's kind of the criteria that I go through when I think about where can technology help. Is it's got to be important enough for people to want to do something differently, and it's got to be financially worthwhile. We live in the real world, right? Care costs money. It needs to be able to pay for itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think while AI is going to affect the entire RCM workflow, because it's not, it's a huge area, and it's a lot of people doing a lot of work here in the U.S. and overseas to support us. The medical coding in particular is the one where it's the longest, it's the longest pole in the tent. It's the one that's going to get hit first.
In terms of RCM, do you feel like we're on a trajectory of change within that sector of healthcare?
I just think it's going fast. We're not AI, the current incarnation of AI, starting with, 2019, the big inflection point I would contend was 2019. And when Google came out with attention is all you need, and the transformer technology, which is the T in ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, there's been computer-assisted medical coding even before there were electronic medical records, right? So computer-assisted coding is, makes it, like, in general, like in any business, the second a new technology comes around, people often ask, how does this help me get paid quicker? And if you kind of map the generation of computer-assisted coding, it really does correspond with technological innovation. So obviously the growth of EMRs moved a lot of the coding revenue cycle businesses from labor to technology as some of that work started to get automated. Then you had some earlier generations of natural language processing, and there was a generation of computer-assisted coding that came to take advantage of it. What we're seeing now, though, every generation always says this is the most important one, right? And it is till the next one comes about. But right now, with generative AI, what we're really seeing is an entirely order of magnitude understanding, moving from understanding what's written from words to meaning. And, an example of that would be even silly things like acronyms, which medical records have a ton of them. I mean, a incredible number. So if I see in a medical record, diagnosis of HL started on a statin versus diagnosis of HL sent to audiology, In the first case, HL probably stands for hyperlipidemia, high cholesterol. In the second case, it probably refers to hearing loss. This is the same word, HL. I mean,
Yeah.
diagnosis of HL.
It's
What
like, how do you
matters,
tell the difference?
the second part of the sentence is actually changing the meaning, right? And to a human who does this for a living, that's easy, right? I mean, we do it without thinking, like, duh. But to the early generation, until you really had transformers, that wasn't possible. So you still had the labor was doing a lot of taking search, glorified search, control F, and parsing it through. Now that we're able to understand meaning, we can do so much more, and not just be more accurate in figuring out what HL means, but being able to understand stuff like, patient refused vaccine because concerned about autism. And being able to, versus patient refused vaccine because reported he got the, quote, flu the last time he got his flu shot.
So it's a lot more specific.
A lot more specific, a lot more understanding. And now you can ask the question, not why didn't Kevin get his vaccine? And to be clear, I get all my vaccines, but I'm married to a pediatrician. It's a big deal. But not to say, that I did or not get it, which was historical care, but why? And then maybe there's specific educational content or methods to outreach to him or her based on the reasons. And obviously that's a behavioral issue. There's clinical. Maybe I respond to one drug versus another. We're able to ask so many more questions of the data than we ever had before. And I think that's where all that extra time I talked about why the coders are not going to go to the way of the dinosaur. I think their role's going to transform to coding more data, more of the why data than the what data that we're struggling with today.
So essentially, I would kind of assume it's kind of data personalization.
Personalization in so many ways. Be able to better predict risks. So which patients be able to better improve a care team, which is the best provider set to surround a patient with, and also an individual treatment. If the patient, for example, struggles with health literacy or has some other issues, maybe we'll simplify the management, for example, their diabetes versus for them, or at least initially, versus being able to use the gold standard treatment on day one. That type of personalization is key. And the other thing that I really would like to do is not just have AI help personalize the care, but if we can offload some of the administrative tasks for the docs, whether or not that's coding their encounters or submitting a prior auth, we can give that time back to doctors and nurses to explain that personalized recommendation to the patient in a way that's never been done before. I mean, that's the stuff that AI has very little role with, I contend, is the human connection of healing. We're paying doctors and nurses too much money to write documentation for the sake to have it in the file to defend a bill or defend a lawsuit. And when we're spending too much money on EMRs to make that text even longer, let's give them the data they can need to get back to healing, which is ultimately what they want to do, what we want them to do. It's the whole point of this. I mean, the product that we're supposed to be making as a healthcare system is better outcomes, right? And better patient satisfaction.
Yep, I completely agree. We definitely need them in that role of healing, rather than focus on all the other probably minuscule tasks. I agree.
Death by 1,000 cuts. One thing here, one thing there, and lo and behold, there's the day, right?
Yep.
Same for you and me.
And touching on you personally, Kevin, how's a day-to-day life for you? If I were to shadow you for the day, what would we be doing?
You've seen one. I would say one of the great things that I love about my KAID is I have a co-founder who's our chief technology officer, Peter Zaleski. So he's responsible for the application development, and most of our employees are actually on his team. So check in with him. Then I spend I would say well over half my day externally facing. So about a half my day, depending on the day, checking with customers and supporting my customer success team. And then the other remainder of the day, try to do some math here, call it 10% checking in on the tech team, 25% checking in on the customer success team, half the day with, including with Jason, who you met, Shane, and part of the process.
Shout out to Jason.
In sales and marketing activities. And then the night work is split between content creation and administration. So administration is like paying bills or balancing the books, so board of director reports. And then the other part is we've taken the approach for our go-to-market strategy of trying to create a content-based marketing. Also, our customers have had 6 peer-reviewed papers a number of white papers. We do some speaking, and that's, it's fun work. I mean, it's kind of, it's in some ways, it's a little bit of relaxation for me, but that's the nighttime. And then what's not in there is what I would call fire time. So throughout that time is just fires, something happens, and it could be anything from the life of an entrepreneur to, we have a problem with AWS, or an M&A happened in the market that's relevant to us, and the investors want an update to. And I kid you not, the toilet and the bathroom in the office clogged, and
But those fire times sound exciting.
Yeah, well, yeah. There are happy fires, and sometimes fires is, one of our major partners, for example, calls us up and says, "Hey, we'd love you to do something. We have some new project for you." So those are happy fires. But more often than not, fire times are not. I mean, I'd be lying to say fire times are all good news. Usually, but it's fun. I've never had a really boring day. And I think every now and then when I get bored for a little hour, I start to fire off a bunch of emails or Slack messages, and my team knows, Kevin's not entertained, so let's manage. They manage me a little bit too there, but I think all in good fun.
Oh, that's so funny. That's the life of the CEO. I completely
But again,
understand.
there's so many different ways to do this, and many entrepreneurs are certainly more successful than me or better at than I am, but the thing that I took away early on was the idea of not going alone, and being able to have at least a partner, a co-founder who's with you to not just, obviously there's collective problem solving, approach the problem from a different lens. Peter obviously approaches this from a technological perspective, me from a little bit more of a market perspective, but also somebody to share the onus of it and share the fires is a great thing. And, that's the one piece of advice when people ask me, should I start a company? I used to work in venture for a while, and, people will say, should I start a company? And part of the answer is, if you have somebody, you don't need to have somebody with you, but if you can, it's certainly a lot better. If you want to buy a house, you can have one bathroom, but it's definitely better if you have a second.
I love that. I'm going to remember that.
Yeah, probably I'm working in my home office, and it happens to be right next to the bathroom. I feel like every time I turn my head, it's kind of top. I feel like I'm getting a subconscious prompt here.
Yeah.
But I don't mean it. I don't mean to take your interview here into the gutter. But
No, absolutely not. And Kevin, just touching a bit deeper on that, what's been the most unexpected learning journey, let's say, in your career?
Well, my most unexpected journey is it's a great question. I would say I'm trying to come up with the right way to say this. Through every entrepreneurial endeavor that I've created, there's almost this temporal discontinuity. That's a fancy way of saying, things kind of happen slowly for a while, and then it clicks. And I guess, the more professional entrepreneurs have words like eventually, a certain level of product market fit maturation occurs, or, they have lots of business school jargon to describe this. But in every case I've had it's been slow, and then it clicks. And you're able to anticipate what the customer is going to ask for even before they do it. And some of it is macroeconomic. I mean, healthcare, just like any other industry, we work on cycles, and our cycles tend to be a little different than the economy as a whole, but they're still there. Some of it is product maturation, but it's being able to manage both sides of that inflection point. So being able to stay with the vision, be able to continue to understand your customers, know that the problem you're solving is real, know that your solution is working towards betterment of that problem. And then when it clicks, being able to quickly jump on it, see that it clicked, and go faster. It's, I remember when we were at my first company out of consulting at CareKey, the first couple of years, we did very, very little commercially, but we continued to mature the product. And then we ultimately secured a relationship with a company called Trizetto that ended up acquiring us. And it was like a step function. Other companies that I worked with, like RxCOB, achieve similar step functions. Companies that I've invested in. I think in consumer marketing, particularly consumer online marketing, there's this little bit of more continuous feedback. Like you could put out a new version of your website, or you buy a new search term, you immediately get some answers back. Is it a little better, a little worse? You do a little bit more. This is more of, you get it, you get the right partner, you get the right product, you get the right time, and you're ready to go.
Things just take
And
off from there.
and I think we're there. We had a really good end of last year. We secured some really important, not just customers, but channel relationships. And for us, I think we're really just in that inflection point right now. So it's exciting and it's fun. It's scary, change, but it's, exactly kind of what you want in a career, I think. All of the above, right?
I completely agree. And real closing last question here, Kevin. What would you say is the most exciting thing you're looking forward to in the future of healthcare or health tech, let's say? And what do you think that will be?
I'll give the simplistic answer, the big answer. The
Okay.
elimination of pajama time.
What's pajama time?
Pajama time is the term used for physicians and nurses who are spending at the end of their day, at the end of their shift, that are then catching up on paperwork. That's, the future of health tech is, those are bad minutes, right? Because these are people, again, I'm on this is personally relevant, but it's not what we want people spending their time doing. For us, in our more narrow to kids world, the more onus, we're already making coding cheap. I mean, that AI will do that. But to be able to make the coding process more valuable to the healthcare organization, to not just get them the revenue, all the revenue they're entitled to with less operating expense, but to give them more data so that they can take more risk on patients, so they can give back providers pajama time, that they could better personalize the care. It's going to happen. I believe we're going to be ones that do it. It's solving a really important problem. How do we make medical coding and RCM a clinical workflow? How do we make it as opposed to a purely administrative function? Is a great thing, because the more dollars in healthcare that we can move from administration to care delivery, the better off we all are. That's the goal.
Yeah, I completely stand with you guys. Well, Kevin,
thank you. Time, Shane.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And where can people find your work?
KAIDhealth.com, KAID health.com. I'm even wearing swag for those of you on video right now.
Merch.
And also, particularly our publications, our white papers. We'll be speaking with a partner of ours at the Rise Healthcare Conference next month in San Antonio. We'll be at the HIM show. Check us out on the Healthcare IT conference circuit. Give us a call, Kevin at KAIDhealth. And for all of the fellow healthcare entrepreneurs, whether or not they're big companies, providers, or technology companies like us that are trying to make this better, I stand with you. Keep up the fight. It's a noble effort.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for your time and for a very fun conversation.
But my pleasure was mine, Shane. Nice to meet you.